In this video, I'm gonna be showing you guys how I mix and master my vocals in FL Studio using stock plugins only. So I'm gonna give you guys a little preview and then we're gonna get into it.
On a day while we live, I'll find you home in a pit. When we perish, I'll see you in heaven's gate, that's where we'll meet.
As you guys can hear, the vocals are nice and clear. They're in their space and they do not overcrowd the instrumental, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna show you guys how I mix them using stock plugins. So the first thing I do is tune the vocal using pitcher. So the key of this beat is D minor. So I set the correction speed to about 94, which is the first category here. And hold on, let me mute the drums. Gonna only leave the 808. This is how it sounds with the pitcher only.
On a day when we live, I'll find you home in a pit. When we perish, I'll see you in.
It sounds incredibly quiet. That is because we don't have the compressor on yet, but I wanted you guys to hear how it sounds with only the pitcher. So let me increase it a bit so you guys can hear it.
On a day when we live, I'll find you home in a pit. When we perish, I'll see you in heaven's gate, that's where we'll meet.
So the pitcher is doing really good there. So it's tuning the vocal nicely. So as I said before, I set the correction speed to about 94, which is the first category. The key of the song is D minor, so I just leave it at that. And then the next thing I add is a limiter. What I do with this limiter is I compress the vocal so that all of the words I say in the lyrics are audible, and so that there's no word which is like quiet or anything like that. So as you guys can see, I crank the threshold down to about -26 decibels, and then I pull the ratio up to 2:6:1. I usually crank it all the way up, but for this one I didn't want to do that. And as you guys can see, I've also put on a little bit of a noise gate in there because there was some background noise when I was recording this. And then I pulled the gain up to about 9 decibels so that all of the words I spit are audible. So this is how it sounds with the compressor. Hold on, let me pull it back because it's gonna get incredibly loud. I forgot to increase it. So this is how it sounds.
On a day when we live, I'll find you home in a pit. When we perish, I'll see you in heaven's gate, that's where we'll meet. On another one we still live. We can pass another one in middle time. Take me off the ordinary, please now. Spend all the time with me for you, see now.
As you guys can hear, all of the words are audible. I like that. And then what I do next is adding a little EQ. So with this one, as you guys can see, I roll off the lows a bit and I boost some of those low mids because that's where my voice is mostly lacking. It's mostly dominant in the high range, so I had to pull the low mids up a little bit. And then as you guys can see, I dip down some of those high mids because, as I've just said, my voice is very dominant in this EQ band, if that makes sense. And then I dip down some of those highs. So this is how it sounds with the EQ.
On a day when we live, I'll find you home in a pit. When we perish, I'll see you in heaven's gate, that's where we'll meet. On another one we still live. We can pass another one in middle time. Take me off the ordinary, please now. Spend all the time with me for you, see now.
I like that. I don't know if you guys can hear, but that fourth EQ band actually does a lot for my vocal, because as I've said, my vocal is lacking in the mids a little bit. So by pumping this up, it really does a lot for me. And then what I do next is add in a second EQ. So what I do with this one is enhance a little bit of those highs, because I tend to take away a lot of them in the first EQ. So with this second one, I increase them a bit just to give them a bit of their life back. And then what I do next is I dip down some of those basses and a little bit of those mids. So this is how it sounds with the second EQ.
Wanna die while we live, I'll find you home in a bit.
I like it now, it's nice and clear. Really simple, guys. And then what I do next is add in this fruity blood overdrive distortion. So what this distortion does is it actually excites the vocal a little more, so that it can be more audible and present in the song. So what I do is crank the preamp to about 0.3, if that makes sense. The color and the post gain, I leave them as they are, and then I crank the print band up a bit, and then the post filter a little bit. So this is how it sounds with the fruity blood overdrive.
Wanna die while we live.
You can immediately hear the difference there.
Wanna die while we live, I'll find you home in a bit. When we perish, I'll see you in heaven's gate, that's what we'll meet. On another, always still live. We can pass another when you made our time. Take me off the ordinary, please now.
As I've said, you can immediately hear the difference there, so I like it. The vocal is more present in the song now. Really easy, guys. And then what I do next is add in a sound goodizer. So what the sound goodizer does is it actually excites the vocal a little more without distorting it. So I use the A band and then I crank the amount up a little bit. So what you must do with this is experiment to see where the vocal sounds good or better, if that makes sense. So for me it was at this range right here, so this is how it sounds.
Wanna die while we live, I'll find you home in a bit. When we perish, I'll see you in heaven's gate, that's what we'll meet. On another, always still live.
And I don't know if I've mentioned this, the vocals, I actually used my voiceover mic, which is the mic that I'm using right now. I didn't use the mic that I usually record my vocals with. So I don't know if you guys may have noticed that, but the vocals sound good though. And then what I do next is add in another EQ. So for this one is just for fine-tuning the frequencies, if that makes sense. So as you guys can see, I've rolled off some of those lows a bit again. I boosted some of those low mids a little bit, those mids in them, and then I dip the high mids up, and then some of those highs I dip them down too. So this is how the vocal sounds with the EQ.
Wanna die while we live, I'll find you home in a bit. When we perish, I'll see you in heaven's gate, that's what we'll meet. On another, always still live. We can pass another when you made our time. Take me off the ordinary.
Immediate difference there. So as I've just said, my vocal tends to lag in those mid frequencies. So by boosting them up, by boosting those mid frequencies up, my vocal sounds much better now. It sounds well balanced and it's sounding good. So the next thing I do is add in a delay. But for this delay, I actually use the 4.0 time, and then I crank the wetness knob down to 28%. And that's not all. I pull the mix level to about 50 or 49% because I don't want it to be too chaotic or anything. So this is how the vocal sounds with the delay.
Wanna die while we live, I'll find you home in a bit.
Maybe unnoticeable to some of you, but I actually used the high pass filter mode for the feedback. Let me do the low pass so you guys can actually hear it.
Wanna die while we live, I'll find you home in a bit. When we perish, I'll see you in.
I think I'm gonna leave it as the low pass filter mode because I like it more, because that high pass one was like kinda, I don't know, unnoticeable or unpresent, if that makes sense. So let's hear it one more time.
Wanna die while we live, I'll find.
Yeah, it sounds much better now. So what I do next is add in a reverb. So what I do for this reverb is I crank the dry level down, and then I crank the wetness level all the way up, and the early reflection level I leave it as it is, and then I increase the decay time to about 3 seconds, and then the bass multiplier I just left it as it is. So this is how it sounds. But wait, as you guys can see, I've actually reduced the mix level to about 13%. That is because it becomes too chaotic when it's like 100%. Let's see how it sounds when it's cranked all the way up in the mixer.
I'll see you in Heaven's Gate, that's what we'll meet. On another, always still live.
It's nice, and it's in its own pocket right now. So that's why I like to do that. You know, just crank it all the way up and then pull it down little by little, so you can hear where it sounds better and all. And then the last plugin I add is a limiter. So what I do for this one is put the ceiling all the way up so that it does not limit any words in my vocals. So this one is kind of like a gain stage, if that makes sense. But yeah, I only just introduce it so that it doesn't limit my vocal or anything. So this is how it sounds with it.
Wanna die while we live, I'll find you home in a bit. When we perish, I'll see you in heaven.
And then the last thing I do is crank up the high band in the mixer EQ. And then I dial down some of those mids and boost some of those lows a bit. So this is just like a I don't know how you would call it, but I kind of like to call it fine tuning, if that makes sense. So I'll pull the highs a little bit up. So this is how it sounds.
Wanna die while we live, I'll find you home.
Just to spice the vocals up, nothing special there. And that's the vocals. So I'm gonna give you guys a preview of how they sound with the entire song.
Wanna die while we live, I'll find you home in a bit. When we perish, I'll see you in heaven's.
Yeah, fire. And then what I do next is mix the ad-libs. So for the ad-libs, it's actually the same thing. I just pull the chain from the lead vocal and just throw it on the track where the ad-libs are routed, and then I just mix them right there. Hold on. Okay, but the only difference here is that instead of using a reverb, I add in this vocal doubler from Isotope. I know that this may be out of context of the tutorial, but if you want to use a stock plugin, you can use the Fruity Stereo Enhancer. It does the same thing, but I prefer using this one because it actually widens the ad-libs really nicely. And then as you guys can see, I add more separation to them, so it sounds nice. So this is how the LIBS sound. Let's firstly preview them without their effects. No, really quiet and slightly out of tune. Hold on. Yeah, so I just do all of that again, you know, the compression, the tuning, the dynamics, all of that, as you guys can see. And then I reduce the highs up a little bit, and then I boost the mids, because I kind of want them to sound a bit like a telephone, if that makes sense, but I don't do too much of that effect. So this is how they sound with all the effects. Sounds really nice, I like it. So this is how they sound, all the vocals sound with the entire song.
On a day while we live, I'll find you home in a pit. When we perish, I'll see you in heaven's gate, that's where we'll meet. On another, always killing. We can pass another one in middle time. Take me off the ordinary, please now. Spend all the time with me before you see it now.
And just like that, that is how you mix vocals using stock plugins. If you guys enjoyed this video, drop a like, subscribe. My name is Retro, we're out here making dope songs. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace out.